Well, I'm Kathy Van Ness from the Golden Door, and tonight I'm pleased to present to you Dr. Pam Brar, who graduated from LSU Medical School in 1995 and moved to San Diego to complete her internal medical training. She was awarded the title of Ellen Brown Scripps Chief Medical Resident at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla in 1999. She joined the Human Longevity team in July 2015 as the Medical Director of Health Nucleus, and the opportunity to collaborate with the scientific visionary Greg Venter and Karen Nelson has been among the highlights of Pam's career. Human Longevity, which is here in San Diego, was founded in Genomics with the ultimate goal of giving everyone the access to the power of data-driven health intelligence. I actually went and did it. So when we talked to my guest, I would actually understand what happens there, which is very smart of y'all to have me do it, and it is quite fascinating. The combination of state-of-the-art DNA sequencing and expert analysis, along with machine learning, can help change medicine to a more data-driven science. With multidisciplinary teams of research scientists, computing experts, and physicians, we are empowering every part of the healthcare system to work efficiently. And one of the key things we've learned there is the power of one. That perhaps mass diets and mass customizing and mass solutions for healthcare may not be the answer, and that's really ties right into what we think at Golden Door. So when you look into the decades, into the future, and predict the state of your physical health, what choices would you make differently if you knew your health from the scientific point of view? It's quite interesting.
Absolutely.
Golden Door is proud now to partner with Human Longevity, and we're going to be having a series of interviews, and then we're going to have a series of training on our property, and we'll announce, sometime in summer we're going to announce a relationship. You see, I'm going to do this. We're going to announce this relationship with this human Health Nucleus, where our guests can actually come to Golden Door, and they will be taken over to Health Nucleus, and they can spend a morning, a day, whatever they want for their own private testing, and be a part of this newfound technology, which was amazing. I never saw my heart look like that in my lifetime. We're talking 35 minutes of the colors of your blood with blue and red and gold, and seeing every single thing about your heart. It was absolutely amazing to me. How did Human Longevity get started?
So great question. And first of all, I just want to thank you for having me tonight. I love being around other women that are interested and curious about how innovation is changing our lives and hopefully extending our lives. So HLI was started in March of 2014 because it's sort of a joint venture between Craig Venter, our founder, and a few other amazing visionaries. Peter Diamandis, who's well known for the X Prize, where he's essentially trying to promote privatized space flight and all kinds of exponential technologies. And then our third founder is a gentleman named Robert Hariri, who is a neurosurgeon by training, who has gotten into stem cell science and really believes in the power of that. So these three brilliant gentlemen sort of were in conversations for some time to sort of say, okay, so we know how to sequence the genome. That was done largely in part by Craig. That was one of his major contributions. He was the scientist that helped sequence the first human genome. But it's been about 20 years since that happened. Well, 18 years since that was done, and yet our understanding of what the genes do has really barely advanced. And so one of the frustrations is, okay, it's great that we can sequence your genome and we can read every single base pair in your genetic code, but if we don't know what it means, then what good does it do, right? And so what's interesting is the 1% or so of the genome that we truly understand has had dramatic implications in advancing science. Right, we've all seen the ads on television for advanced lung cancer and these drugs like Keytruda and others that are specific to certain genetic targets. So essentially the company was founded because of the strong desire to translate the science into something that would extend the healthy human lifespan. And so, with that being and it's, as Craig describes it, as sort of the culmination of all of his life's work, that it was great to sequence the genome, but unless it's actually being used to promote, the betterment of human longevity, then he feels he hasn't quite fully, played out the story as he hopes it to be. So,
how many other people or companies are doing this besides yours?
So there's many companies in the whole genome sequencing arena, many of which are even local. But to my knowledge, we're the only company right now that's combining whole genome sequencing with complex physical testing and proprietary sort of algorithms. So for example, one of the parts of our testing that we think is most helpful is whole body MRI. So people think, oh, I could, go down the street and get an MRI scanner and have my whole body scanned. But there's a lot of complexity around it. And we've gone about, one of the biggest concerns we had is we don't want to scan people and then have all these, what we call incidental findings, where, oh, you've got a lung nodule and you need to go get that biopsied, and all those horror stories that you hear. And so we've made it really our mission to try and avoid those sorts of further problems that can arise by developing technologies that can help us identify if you do have, for example, a lung nodule. We can overlay some post-processing on the technology to see if it lights up in a way that might suggest there's more cell turnover there, as you might expect to see in cancer, where the cells are rapidly, dividing. So I would say that there are companies that are doing the MRI pieces and the CAT scan and some of that, but I think the way that we've combined it is unique.
Interesting. And I've seen it. So the clients that you work with, are you coordinating it with their primary physician, or are they coming to you as a separate sort of action?
It's a good question. So to date, we've seen about 1,700 clients since we opened in October of 2015. And I'd say it's all across the board, right? So I'd say probably just anecdotally, roughly a quarter of them off the top of my head seem to have docs that are very engaged and want to learn on some level what we're doing, how they can integrate it. And and then there's a group that are swamped in their offices, probably drowning in charts like I used to be, that are sort of like, just give me the bottom line. And then there's even a subset that are, a little bit cynical about what we're doing and how is this going to help, and is this why are you spending all this money on? So there's the whole gamut. But I'm pleased that over the time period that I've been at HLI, which it'll be just coming up on 3 years, I feel like the pendulum's starting to swing, where there's more open-mindedness, there's more, so that's exciting.
I think what would be great for our guest, what is it like at a day? What's a day like? Like, really tell them, you arrived through the door. I now know, but I want you to share with them exactly what a day is like.
Sure, as for a client?
As a client.
Okay,
they're coming to you from Golden Door.
Absolutely.
What does that look like?
Perfect. So you would arrive at the south end of our building in this, it's somewhat of I'd say an unusual medical setting, in that it doesn't feel like where you would go as a sick person. At least that's what we've tried to create. So it's about 11,000 square feet of a much larger building. And you walk in, there's sort of an airport loungy sort of feeling, and you can certainly chime in. You check in quickly at the front desk, and you hopefully are being whisked away to your room, which is small. It's probably about, 12 by 12 room, which is appointed sort of in that same style of contemporary furniture, and there's a fruit bowl, and there's some music playing, and some lovely books on the shelf. And you sit down, and we start out by giving you a little orientation about what to expect during the day. One of our clinical staff will meet with each client and go through their medical history, so the usual things that you might expect to have as part of a medical sort of question session. We ask a little bit about why you're there, that you can imagine there's a whole gamut. Some people are worried because their mother had Alzheimer's, or they just want to know more about their health, or what have you. Then you have your blood drawn. We draw several tubes of blood, because we're looking at, of course, your whole genome, which is surprisingly only takes 5 cc's. But then we also look at a large number of metabolites that would be different than what you would get in a normal sort of clinical set of tests. So again, the notion being that we all understand the idea that disease probably has existed for a long time before it starts to cause symptoms. So what we're interested in doing at the Health Nucleus is trying to pick up those early signals that could help us detect or get a suggestion of some imbalance. So we do some what we call metabolic testing, and then we also send off part of the blood to a more traditional lab for things that we're used to get, like things that you would normally get at the lipid panel and thyroid and things of that nature. So then after that, then you go off for your set of tests, which we have 2 different sort of packages of tests, but the one that's sort of our primary one involves in different orders. So some people might get their MRI first and someone else might get, say, a CAT scan first. But I'd say the crown jewel of our experience, we think, is the whole body MRI. So we bring you into the room. I don't know how many of you ladies have had MRIs, but most people at some point or another may have come across this. And so you have to stay quite still. We do our best. The scan takes about 70 minutes. Which is, no small feat for me to be without my cell phone for 70 minutes. I'm like, God. Although then I kind of got into it.
Just put it over there, you can use your eye.
Right, exactly. So, and that, you go in, again, most people may have had MRIs by now, but we try and make it as comfortable as we can. We let people come in and out if they need to. But essentially, we're scanning you from your head to your mid-thigh. And that's really to look for, you can imagine cancer is one of the primary things we're looking for. But one of the things I love is that we're trying to sort of measure you and digitize you, so to speak, so we can measure the lobes of your brain and the size of the hippocampus, which we know connects to short-term memory. And we can look at your frontal lobe and see the size of that and take these very small measurements or these very exact measurements. Because our idea is, how can we really get clues about someone, get a baseline, and then follow them hopefully over time to see, are you showing any signs of, problems before hopefully they manifest in other ways. So the MRI includes a very detailed exam of the brain, and then we also are able to look at brain vasculature for aneurysms and things of that nature. What we hope for is everyone's brain is perfect and their body's perfect, but there are things that we look for that hopefully, if detected early, could avoid horrible stories like we've all heard about with premature death from things that are preventable. So the scan continues down the body, through the abdomen and pelvis, and then hopefully people breeze through that. We use aromatherapy and music and videotapes and all kinds of things to hopefully get
watch
people
some
through.
Fishes swimming.
Exactly. And then once you're through the MRI, then a couple other things, CAT scan to look for any calcium in the heart's arteries that might suggest a higher risk of heart disease. We do some neurologic testing, which may be new since when you came through. We have a balance tracking machine that helps us look at oh good, so you were able to see that. So series of tests. So I'd say imagine going sort of in a fairly small confined area, going from one station to the next, so you're not having to walk all over the place like you might see in a more traditional setting. And our goal is to make it very, hopefully relaxing to the extent it can be, and focus so you feel like it's your day. And also recognizing, I think any of us, it was funny when I went through it, I was like, holy cow, like, is there something wrong with me? You start to then think, like, could I have it? It's sort of like all of a sudden the things you don't think about. So I'm glad I went through it myself. And we try, one of our biggest sort of advancements just recently is we're trying to get people their results of at least their imaging back the same day. So before you walk out the door, you at least know we've looked at your whole body MRI. Because it's, I think it's normal to feel a little apprehensive once you're doing all that testing.
One of the interesting questions was, do you want to know?
Right, that's a very good question.
It was 4 steps. Do you want to know this? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this?
Right.
Why would someone go through all of that and not want to know?
It's a great question. I think the most common scenario where people don't want to know, in my experience, has been their risk of Alzheimer's genetically. And I think understandably, I think the concern is, well, if there's nothing I can do about it, why would I want to know? I'm waiting for the next, shoe to fall, or my next, like if I don't find my keys, I assume I have Alzheimer's. So, and you can understand that, especially for people that have a strong family history. So I think, so far, I think our clientele selects out for people that want to know everything and more. But, what's been fascinating is the couples. So often you'll have a couple and one of them is dying to know everything, and the other one is like, oh my God, I'm only here because my husband's dragging me here, or what have you. So we've had a fair amount of experience dealing with kind of that apprehension. So we walk people through it. You do have the option to opt out of certain genetic information, and I'd say only about 1% of our clients to date have chosen to opt out.
Are you finding more and more interest now that this is fairly new?
Yes, we absolutely are. I think, initially, our founder, Craig, tends to be someone that gets a lot of sort of press and is sort of he's a maverick in many ways. And so I think initially there was some pushback, like, why is this only for wealthy people and so on. But I think as we've a couple years into it, and I think have shown some of the benefits of some of the early detection that we believe we're engaging with, I think we're starting to people are starting to come around. And we've also, really looked, we want to democratize this ultimately. So being able to, provide lower price point packages has also, I think, increased the interest.
The care and the, I want to use love, but I know that's probably not the right word, of your physicians while you went through the process was unbelievably amazing.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear
you're
that.
like laying on a table and looking at your heart. You have no idea what you're looking. It just looks like the baby when it was in. You saw you get your baby having a teeth. It looks like that. Clearly it wasn't. The color helped a lot, blue and red. But they were so thoughtful to sort of explain to you, okay, you're doing this at this time and here's going to be your results. You're looking at this time.
Right.
They're obviously not going to give you any medical advice. They're just here to take the test. But they were actually quite supportive as a complete layman of saying, here's your heart, and here are all the valves, here's the aorta, and here's how it goes, and here's the sideway picture and the up picture and the bottom picture.
Great.
It was actually quite good. Do you see us doing this? First of all, I think this is going to completely grow.
Yes.
Do you see us doing it on an annual basis? This is like a 5-year thing. How do you see it sort of changing as becoming actually part of healthcare?
Absolutely. So, we're still somewhat in early stages, but our idea is we tried to go about choosing technologies that had very little risk to people. So reducing the amount of, avoiding a lot of radiation. So the only testing that we do that includes any radiation is the coronary calcium score, which is still a fairly small dose of radiation and not something we would recommend annually necessarily. And also our bone density, which, again, is also quite a small radiation dose. So we've tried to create a sort of select test that would really not cause a lot of harm to our clients and therefore give us the opportunity, if so desired, to repeat them fairly frequently. So right now what we're finding is we just are rolling out our membership, which is a follow-up for folks that have come back through. We're offering it at an annual basis, sort of as an annual package for 5 years. And with a few different packages that we're putting together. So it's our median age has been about 52 to 53, somewhere in that zone.
Young.
So it's young, but it's also at an age where, certainly you start thinking more seriously about prevention and things of that nature. So we're looking at innovative ways to add in things like colon, stool testing for, DNA that might suggest a colon cancer, things of that nature. So trying to use innovation and our knowledge to maximize the benefit to people while reducing discomfort, risk, things of that nature.
One of the things we talked about was how little we know about ourselves as a species.
Yes.
There's so much research going on in the mind and on the body, and we think we know a lot, but we really don't.
So much we don't
Does
know.
that impact your own future development? How do you see yourself expanding even beyond to where you are today?
Absolutely. So the Health Nucleus, I think our goal is to really try and get as diverse a set of data and knowledge, because I think in the background of all this, our big goal is to create a large data set of whole genome sequences plus all this, very high level, high quality physical data on people. And then start to make crosswalks where all of a sudden you start to notice, oh, everyone with this variant of this gene also happens to have a dilated aorta. So could it be that gene causes this condition? So for our purposes, from the big picture, as much as we want each individual that comes through to have great value for themselves, we also want to change the world, right? We want to make a larger contribution. So to that end, we know that just while we love our facility here, we want to put these up all over the world.
Right.
So we're looking at some international partnerships, potentially some probably looking to expand with one other site in California sometime during this calendar year. So, and the notion is, of course, we want to expand our database to include other ethnicities that may not be as well represented. We're finding, of course, you can imagine our demographic sort of tends to sway certain ways, higher socioeconomic.
But the more data you have, the better you can sort of predict, right?
That's what we believe, absolutely.
You need more data.
That's right.
And you don't want to use anybody else's data.
That's correct,
right?
Exactly.
Because your data, as I understand, is perfect, and you don't trust adding in maybe somebody's false data that could be actually altered.
Right. Well, we found, originally there were a few different ideas touted, one of which was, okay, we have the world's largest whole genome sequencing center. So if people started sending us, say, for example, pharmaceutical trials, started sending us large volumes of samples to sequence, what if they also sent us their physical chart information? But the problem is the quality of, an echocardiogram done, at one place may not be the same. So it's hard to really use that data in a way that you feel reliably,
This way you're controlling it.
That's right.
So geneticists report that 40% of the people who've undergone the company's screening process have something seriously wrong. But only 2.5% of the people undergone the companies have actually any major tumors or anything have discovered at stage 0. It's kind of confusing. The question really here is right now, with so many people wanting to do this and wanting to understand if something is wrong or not wrong, it's quite expensive.
Yes.
But if you opened up more and more of these, wouldn't you drive the price down?
Absolutely. I mean, there's several factors that are driving the price down. You know, when Craig sequenced his genome in 1999, it cost $100 million and took 9 months. Nowadays, you can do whole genome sequencing for about $1,500, and it takes about 72 hours. So you can see that, you know, there's a dramatic shift in, you know,
get it down to $100.
Absolutely. So
right.
It's 100% our goal to try and democratize this.
So the more you would have, the more valuable, the more value you could create, basically.
Absolutely.
Right? That's
You know,
so
and some of
interesting.
this, is just
Then
technology.
why everybody would do it.
That's right.
Don't
I
you
mean,
think?
yes. I mean, I think, you know, why would you not want to do it? But I mean, certainly people have different ideas and philosophies and so on. But certainly we believe the larger the number of people we have come through will help grow the database and hopefully drive the cost down.
Do most patients come in thinking they were perfectly healthy?
That's a good question. I think that I would say the large majority, if I had to guess, probably 85% think they're in great health. And we tend to attract people that are competitive, overachievers, you know, early adopters, and then sometimes their spouses, which may or may not fall into that same, you know, that same frame. But yeah, I'd say generally people are there because, I mean, we are marketing towards healthy people that want to know the most about their health. So I'd say generally people think they're healthy. Occasionally you'll get someone that says, God, I know, I just don't feel good. I'm looking for some reassurance, you know, or, you know, that a lot of executives, so a lot of people that are burning the candle at both ends.
When you get your final report, it's quite complex.
Yes.
And you take the time to sort of explain it. But are you thinking of making it super layman friendly?
Yes.
Because it's hard to understand all those tests.
Absolutely. And that's been an ongoing sort of, I think, interesting challenge, right? How do you look at 3.2 billion letters of the genetic code and condense it down to something? Well, come find out. No, it's pretty amazing. No, we're working every day to try and make it more and more, making sure we understand it in a way that allows us to explain it to our clients and their physicians and, you know, and on and on. So we have amazing genetic counselors that are part of our team. And really, genetic counselors are trained on how to explain findings, explain the relevance, talk people off ledges, you know, things of that nature, and also to help people understand the serious nature of some of, you know, what we find.
And do the patients, after they come there, do you find they actually take that data and become in action, or do you think they just walk away and say, I'm going to try something else?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. I mean, I think what I've frankly found is some of the physical, we refer to the term phenotype, and phenotype is basically anything you can physically measure about a person. So this might include your MRI or your CAT scan or what have you, whereas genotype is the term for the genetic information. So I would say on the phenotype side, what's been quite enlightening to me is a few scenarios that come to mind. In my practice, before I came to HLI, I would frequently see people that were, you know, the typical executive, doing well financially, but not getting enough sleep, drinking too much, eating out every night, probably not exercising. And often their blood pressure would be maybe a little high, their weight's a little high, but their labs look pretty good. And, you know, if their weight was a little high, well, I just got back from a cruise. I mean, there's always that whole conversation, right? What I particularly love about some of the testing that we're doing is it really objectively measures things that you can't explain away as easily. So things like liver fat percentage on the MRI.
That's a good one.
It's pretty compelling. It's hard to be like,
compelling.
Okay, wow, my liver fat's, 10%. Normal is 4% or less. So I'm finding, I've had a few of my former patients come in to do our testing, and we have these very interesting conversations like, oh, well, I guess I can't really just explain that away. So I'd say from that perspective, it gives more objective milestones and sort of variables that are hard to explain away, and tends to push people to action.
I agree. And because the information is science, it's really science.
That's right.
I mean, you're really looking inside someone's body.
Right.
And looking not only through the tissues and muscles and everything else, but the actual sort of cells.
Right.
Explain that to my audience, exactly what it is that you're looking at.
So what we're trying to do, again, is to sort of measure everything we can reasonably measure that we think will yield any signals that would suggest either disease or a predisposition to disease or an imbalance of some kind. But the lens is all through the diseases that can shorten someone's lifespan. So as much as we would love to know about someone's hormonal health or their mental sort of well-being from a standpoint of mood and so on, what we've decided is if we try and look at everything all at once, we're probably not going to get much clarity about anything. So what we've decided to focus on as a first step is looking at diseases that we know shorten people's lifespans. That's our first focus. And so through that lens, we've tried to look at all of the testing that's out in the world, whether it's currently in clinical use, like a cholesterol panel, or it's something that might be more research use only. So things like metabolomic testing or stool microbiome. And we're trying to extract nuggets of sort of information that can help us to put together a story about someone's health that is compelling and we think is real, right? So, I mean, how many times did I see a patient over the years where I'd be like, God, something is wrong. I know there's something wrong. They're losing weight or, they're just not feeling well. And all the standard testing I did, just nothing, there's nothing. And then it might be 6 months later, all of a sudden, oh, there's, a tumor or there's something. And so that kind of gut instinct. So we're trying to look at, again, things like, the whole genetic, looking at the whole genome to see what things they might be predisposed to, and then looking at the metabolomics to look for, okay, on someone's, for example, cardiac panel, are they showing elevation in certain chemicals that might lead us to suspect that they might be, at risk for a heart attack, or, and then looking structurally at the body to see what we can find. So really, it's like detective work. And it's daunting a little bit because I think as an individual, no one wants to be sick, right? And we don't want to be sort of there to say, okay, we're only here to tell you what's wrong with you. I mean, the flip side, and one of the most gratifying things, is when someone's really quite healthy and you can say, God, your brain looks amazing, I'm not finding any signs of disease. And that's been, I think, one of the most joyful parts of what we do. And so I'd say we're trying to look for the most kind of the earliest signals of things that might be out of balance, but with the focus on serious diseases. While certainly many things are serious, we're looking first at what things shorten people's lifespan on a, kind of statistical level.
And aren't they also trying to find ways that, let's say you have the BRCA gene, they could take the BRCA gene, once they find that you have this BRCA gene,
right,
that they can take the BRCA gene out.
Right, so technologies like CRISPR,
right.
Yes, exactly. Now we're, and that's right
and
now.
Replace it obviously with another gene.
Right,
to
right.
reduce your obviously problem of having BRCA problems.
Right. And that's, I think we're not quite there yet. I mean, if you look at China, there's more, here things are much more regulated. There's a lot more concern about safety and implications of genetic editing. But I think there's no doubt that I think it's, it's on the horizon.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing. And looking at
even in a child, I just
right.
had a conversation today, this is absolutely fascinating, where a child was in utero.
Yes.
And had the BRCA gene, and they
yes.
removed it.
Yes.
Is that possible?
It's amazing, yes.
They removed it.
Yes.
I had no idea. Did you know? They went in there. Well, you would know.
Yeah, there's technologies like CRISPR where you can go into a cell and literally identify, the region in the gene that causes that particular disease and actually clip it out and then replace it with a functional gene that doesn't have that same disease potential.
They're literally replacing the gene.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So you'll hear
this is so fascinating.
Yeah,
and
it's incredible.
I'm just taking you way up here. We're just
Absolutely.
Introducing.
Yeah.
This is really, we could get super deep in this.
Right.
It's quite fascinating.
It's incredible. And I think in the States, in the US, I think it takes longer for some of these types of technologies because there's serious implications. At what point, there's conversations about what if you don't want your child to have green eyes?
Right.
There's all these these crazy different places it could go.
Right.
So I think we're a little bit away from that yet, but it's not that far. A lot of that work was done up in Northern California.
Wasn't there a stop on genetic testing and then it now restart? Wasn't there a lot of controversy about it?
So 23andMe, which is one of the most well-known, I suspect that's probably what you're referring to, they are one of the big first players in the space. They got into some trouble a few years ago because they were reporting results directly to patients without any kind of intermediary like a genetic counselor to help explain the implication. So the worry was, what if someone finds out they have the 2 copies of the gene that causes Alzheimer's and then they go and take their own life or some horrible thing, or they use the information to make decisions that weren't really consistent with what the data showed, or so it's the idea of kind of protecting the consumer. And so with 23andMe, unfortunately, didn't necessarily take the FDA or the concerns by the FDA as seriously as they should have at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was essentially a lot of their work was stopped. They've since corrected it, and I think it's fantastic because I do think there's a lot of interesting value that they offer. It's a different level of genetic testing. It's looking more at the most common, genes that are linked to disease, a much smaller segment of the whole genome. But I still applaud the work they're doing.
Yeah, of course. And this is, we talk about human longevity, where life is definitely going to be 100. There's no question that our children and grandchildren are going to live to 100, maybe 120, like incredible, right? When people used to live to 40s, 50s, and 60s, we're going to live a lot longer.
Right.
How is this going to affect that health? Because the body is not improving. The body is the same body that we had when we were living in 30s and 40s. It's not like the cars or everything else. Weird. We might lose a few molars, but that's about it.
Well,
we're basically, this is it. It's got to do a lot more work.
But is it really it? I mean, you look at things like stem cell, science, and are we going to be able to regenerate parts of it? I mean, all of that sort of a whole frontier that we're yet to fully understand.
Oh my gosh. Are there any advancements or technology with either genomics or any other kind that you particularly are fascinated by?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I feel like a kid in a candy store. I think I have the coolest job in the world. But so I would say, to me, I think the advancements in imaging technology are just astounding. What we can see without radiation, without contrast dye, very quickly. So that to me has been one of the higher yield parts of our testing. Yeah,
you do not drink anything, take anything.
You don't have to fast. I mean, it's kind of just remarkable.
It's fascinating. I mean, maybe the night before you just right, but it was incredible.
For me, in my professional career, I mean, to see the advancements in just imaging it's just phenomenal, So I'd say that's been one of the more exciting parts of what we do. But I think also, starting to understand more about the microbiome, knowing that all the little inhabitants of our stool, I mean, it just has to make sense that they affect our health, right? They outnumber our own cells by about 10 to 1. So it just stands to reason that the behavior of all those bacteria and organisms in our gut probably do affect, our health. And so I think getting more understanding about that, it's still in early stages.
We talk a lot here about our health and that the body replenishes and almost repairs itself every single day.
Right.
But many times people are detoxing and fasting and detoxing and cleansing and all of these things are doing to their body. But we try to go back and explain, but your body is this incredible machine and it does this every day. I think it's a good thing to explain to our audience that these fungus, things that live inside us are part of us and our system. And if you over detox, you're going to strip them.
Right.
And then they can't do their job.
That's right. I had a professor in med school that I still love. I think of him and he says, look, the colon is like a self-cleaning oven. You just got to let it do it, let it do its thing. And I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of mechanisms in our body that are probably more complex than we even give credit to.
Right, they do the job.
And have sort of probably self-healing properties and things of that nature. So I really commend and admire the work you're doing here because I think there's so much to the mind-body connection and understanding us as individuals and doing the spiritual work and all of that. I love the science that we're contributing, but I think it also requires a compassionate, open mind to think about the implications of some of this. Like to your point, if we live to be 150, but our minds aren't working, or how do we think about some of these challenges?
Well, and we know today that women are going to live obviously longer than men. It's just a fact.
Right.
That's by a large number. And that if we're going to be living into the hundreds and beyond, then we have to have mindfulness. Because the mind must rest.
Right.
It has to rest.
Exactly.
It has to turn off. So what's next for you?
Oh, good question. Well, maybe a trip to the Golden Door. It's looking pretty good.
You only got to come tonight. I told you you have to come back.
I definitely am going to come back.
We'll definitely give you mindfulness.
Oh, I thank you. I'd love to come back. Well, what I'm most excited about, aside from my daughter's 16th birthday tomorrow, is I think continuing to explore taking what we're doing to different parts of the United States and also to the world, to be able to understand, how do other cultures influence health and sort of that whole component. So another thing that I'm really interested about is, we just came, Shannon and I, my colleague over there, just came from a networking event in Florida with these incredible women, much like yourselves, that are bright and interested. And what came out of that conversation was the relative underrepresentation of women in research still. So
You need to say that even more.
yes, so
It's
I just
amazing,
really got
right?
sort
You
of
were in Palm Beach.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Access Circles, yes.
It really ignited
Was-
my
yes.
desire to better understand that. It's been interesting because in our client population, about 2/3 have been men, and those
Including
are
the animals.
yeah, there you
The
go.
mice are men.
That's
Men
right.
mice.
That's right. Yeah, why are the males? Isn't that fascinating?
I had no idea until
Yeah, that's
recently.
a very recent. I mean, I've been spending hours since that session last weekend reading more about why are women still so underrepresented. So that's
So what we're saying is that in on most of the tests on products and on things are done on either men or male mice or male cats or whatever they're testing,
Right.
but they're not testing on females. And as we women all clearly know, females are very different from males. And therefore, those tests may not even be applicable for what's going on in our bodies.
Right.
It's fascinating. So
Exactly.
now they're taking a step back and saying, maybe we better go test some of these things on females and find out what we have here.
Exactly.
It's very interesting. That would have
agree.
been interesting. So every time before, because I know my ladies, I know they all want to go hiking, and I promise them, we were just touching the surface on this, the micro surface on this subject. It's going to be a big subject, and we're going to talk about it a lot every month here at Golden Door. It's going to be a big part of our thing. But we love leaving a golden nugget for our guest after every interview. And it's something that you're going to give them.
Oh, I love it. Okay,
Some
great.
piece of knowledge or advice or something that they could take with them, and we call it our golden nugget.
I love it.
It's your turn tonight.
Okay, wonderful. I have a few. So one, I would say genes are not your destiny. So I hope with that to empower people to learn more about their genetics, because it can affect and improve the decisions that you make for yourself and your family. So I'd say while genes are important, they're not your destiny. Knowledge is power, and we see that every day where we come in with people that are afraid to go through the testing. They go through it, and it's life-changing in many different ways, potentially. I would say mice are not little men. I would say women are not little men. So it's all these different things that we all joke about it. It's like, wait, don't treat women like little men, because we're not. So I'd say, but most importantly, from the experience that I've had, genes are not your destiny. So to try and expand our thinking so we're not so afraid of kind of this, this unknown world and frontier of genetics.